Are the bones and sutures of the skull, and starting with the frontal bone, which is obviously on the front section of the skull, and then going to the top of the skull, we have both the left and right parietal bones, which then coming back to the posterior section of the skull, we have the left and right occipital bone, and then on the lateral section of the skull, we then have the temporal bone. And then moving to the inside of the skull, we have what looks like a butterfly, which is known as the sphenoid bone. And then moving to the nasal section, or the front of the skull, we have the ethmoid bone, which is farther back inside the eye socket. And then we have what is obvious is the nasal bone, which is right here on the top of where the nose would be. And then we have the lacrimal bone, which is more on the superficial side of the eye socket. It's in front of the ethmoid. We then have the vomer, which is this bone in the nasal cavity, which splits it in two. It can also be seen from the inside of the skull, right here. We then have the left and right zygomatic bones, which are the lateral sides of the orbital bones. Here is the left zygomatic bone and the right zygomatic bone. We then have the left and right maxilla, which is down here on what would be the top of your jaw underneath the nasal cavity. We then have the palatine bone, which is on the inside of the mouth, right here. And then the last bone is the mandible, which of course is the lower section of the jaw. And then going to the sutures, there's 4 sutures that you need to know. And putting the skull back together, we first have the coronal suture, which separates the frontal bone from the 2 parietal bones. This is the coronal suture right here. And then separating the 2 parietal bones, we have the sagittal suture, which runs down the length of the skull. And then in the back, which separates the parietal bones from the occipital bone, we have the lambdoid suture. And then on the left and right side of the skull, separating the parietal bone from the temporal bone, we have the squamous suture, which is right here.